It's official. America has killed civilians with drone strikes in Muslim nations. At a news conference after a nuclear security summit in Washington, US President Obama was asked about an increase in drone operations in Libya, Syria, Somalia and elsewhere. He admitted America should take responsibility for civilian deaths and said they had recently taken steps to avoid them.
The US has been criticised for flawed intelligence. A drone attack in Yemen caused global uproar after it hit a wedding party, killing women and children. In 2015, a gunship mistakenly opened fire on a charity hospital in Afghanistan, burning patients to death in their beds. The CIA uses unmanned aircraft for airstrikes and spying missions in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Somalia, Yemen, Syria and elsewhere. Washington claims they target militant groups, but local officials and witnesses say civilians are the main victims in most cases. Rights groups are especially concerned about highly controversial signature strikes, where people with unknown identities are targeted by the CIA based on looks, suspicious behaviour or other so-called signatures.
Are America's actions malicious or reckless? Do lethal drone strikes provoke activism or pacifism? And what message should be sent to the US President about expanding drone strikes? These are the simple questions we sought to answer. Now, Obama admitted US drone strikes have killed civilians in Muslim-majority countries. Why does the US continue killing so many civilians around the world? We put that to the American public.
I'm not sure why. It's a terrible shame.
Most likely probably for national security. It doesn't mean it's right or civil or an act of peacekeeping in any way, considering the majority of people dying in these air attacks are women, children, and the elderly.
There is no justification for that. I have no idea how, if it is, as they say, casualties, human targets put in place. There's so much we don't know, of course, right, as to why that happened.
They're trying to get to the terrorists, and the terrorists are hanging out in residential areas. And it's unfortunate that's only hurting the people over there. I don't see how else they are going to get to the enemy. It's a complicated situation.
I think it's collateral damage. I don't necessarily agree with it because I'm sure that in any other country or culture they care about their children the same as we do. And they love their kids just like we love ours. And it's unfortunate and it's tragic, but the task at hand, sometimes collateral damage comes with it.
Our experts are invited to consider the reasons behind why so many civilians around the world are being killed by American action.
Well, it's a question that lots of people around the world are asking. Why does the US keep killing people? And one of the answers is because it simply can. And it always has done. It's nothing new. We're not talking about a new invention or a new concept in American foreign policy. This is a policy which America has had since anyone can remember, since it entered the foreign world affairs. And it reminds me of the answer that Bill Clinton gave to Monica Lewinsky in that situation. When they asked him, Bill, why is it you did what you did? And he said, simply because I can. And that's the problem we've got. Arrogance, hegemony, and just this complete contempt of international law and human rights.
They unleashed a war on the Middle East and on Central Asia nearly 15 years ago, and it's been an absolute catastrophe, and it's turned into a cycle of violence. And rather than learning the lessons of that disaster and recognising how damaging their efforts have been and their whole project is, they have simply continued to continue their aggressive policies. And the drone warfare is just the latest phase in the war on terror. And the idea that drone killings are any less lethal or destructive or are likely to create any less anger than occupations or bombings is ridiculous. Of course, the killing of civilians by drones is going to create more anger, and it's going to intensify the cycle of violence.
Obama made the admission when asked about an increase in drone operations in Libya, Syria, Somalia and elsewhere. Have the US's actions in these countries been malicious or reckless? We asked the public.
I don't think they're malicious or reckless. I think he's probably doing the best he can with the information he's getting, and it's hard to gather information and make good decisions when you're not right there, and it's impossible for him to be right there, and the people that really need to, it's hard to be in that area that they're fighting so much.
I don't think they have been malicious. No. I think they're just doing their job. They're doing their job, protecting the country. That's it.
Well, I suppose we could say both. I mean, they're hurting people, right? And we're all together on the planet Earth, hurting each other.
That's a good question. They have been reckless because of our Secretary of State that used to be, Hillary Clinton. She was very reckless with our country. She was very reckless with our ambassador and our people in Benghazi, and has not been held accountable for that. That's reckless, yes. Our only mission is to protect our country. We need to protect Americans. That's all we care about. We're not out to kill people. We just don't do that. That's not our game. We want to protect ourselves. We want to protect America. America's important to us.
Is that what you said, reckless? Probably malicious and reckless.
What's the expert view on whether the US has acted maliciously or recklessly in its use of lethal drone strikes around the world?
Well, using the word reckless suggests that they weren't intentional and it was just based on stupidity, but this is quite part of their plan. It's malicious, it's inhumane. Look, we all believe, anyone with a righteous mind believes that George Bush is a war criminal. Yet when we see the number of drone attacks he actually commissioned since 2001 up until the completion of his tenure, there was about 52 drone attacks just looking at Pakistan. If we look at Obama, since he's been in power, there have been 350 odd drone attacks with over 3,500 casualties. I mean, this is not reckless. This is pure malicious vendetta against people and this isn't including Somalia, Libya and anywhere else they're sitting someplace in America flying these drones. And this is a problem, another problem we've got with the US administration. It willy-nilly decides completely unilaterally what it's going to do, and to show support it shows the usual suspects always and all the time. It's not reckless, my friend, it is complete maliciousness.
Well, I think the whole foreign policy that has been pursued over the last 15 years, including under the Obama presidency, is malicious, it is aggressive, it is damaging, it is causing chaos and carnage wherever it's targeted. And the drone strikes are presented as being, discriminate and targeted and free from civilian casualties. This simply isn't the case. All the serious research that has been done shows that many civilians are killed in almost all the strikes. The most recent bit of research I saw said that about 5,000 people have been killed in Afghanistan and Pakistan alone by US drone strikes, the majority of those being civilians. So, this is a completely counterproductive and very murderous program. And the advantage from Obama for Obama of the drone strategy is not that it kills less people, but that actually that you can get away with it without having to admit it to Congress, to the public, with very little scrutiny. And it's a kind of a war that is being fought behind the backs of the people.
A US drone attack in Yemen several years ago caused global uproar after it hit a wedding party and killed women and children. Could Americans cite this as an example of US barbarity, or are most unaware it even happened?
Most people are ignorant, yes.
I think it's mostly people aren't aware of it. They're ignorant of it.
A lot of people are ignorant about it simply because of the fact that a movie was just released about these Yemen attacks. I do not remember the name of the movie. But the fact of the matter is that because they are using the media in order to portray these attacks as something that is civil because it's in America's interest, it's probably making them more ignorant to the fact that these attacks are happening and atrocities are coming out of them.
I think most people are ignorant about it. It's unfortunate that civilians are murdered during these attacks, and a lot of people are not aware of what's really going on. It's very barbaric. It's very sad.
I think most people are ignorant about it, yeah.
I don't know that I'd characterize it either of those two ways, but I think that a lot of people don't know about that. But again, I go back to the point that the drones aren't any kind of specific malicious act. They're just trying to do as much effective attacks with putting the least number of people at risk.
I would say a lot of people are not aware. A lot of people do not stay up on current events. They don't know what's going on in the world. So yes, I have to agree with you that there's not the level of awareness that there should be.
I'd say most people are ignorant.
Well, I had no idea about that. That sounds awful. Yeah, that's terrible. That's a terrible thing. If that's something we did, then yeah, I don't condone that at all. That should not happen.
We asked our experts to what extent the American public know about the US drone attack which killed so many civilians at that wedding party, and should we consider this an act of barbarism?
I think to use the word ignorant suggests that there's culpability on behalf of the international civilians, or if in this particular instance, American civilians. Let's give them benefit of the doubt. What we've got is a situation, again, where the media in America especially will make this news item number 3, item number 4, if any. And even if it becomes item number 1, they'll spend equally double the amount of time citing American administration staff saying how sorry they are that they've done this. Now, the problem we've got is this. If you commit a problem once, if you commit a crime once, it's like, okay, you know, it wasn't intentional. You do it twice, it was a mistake. 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times. This is on par with American foreign policy. It's not the first time it's happened. It's not the second time it's happened, and it won't be the last time it happened. They never learn. And about the ignorance side, it's because of the way the media is working and manipulating the mindsets of people in America. I mean, thank God we've got this independent media now, be it through TV channels or satellite channels or social media, where the Americans, public in large, is slowly becoming more and more what's being done in their name.
Well, I think part of the reason why the drone strategy was adopted by the US and other Western countries is precisely because of the level of opposition that are developed domestically against the kind of first phases of the war on terror. And the advantage from their point of view of drone attacks is that they can be done with very, very minimal scrutiny, either by the media or by Congress or Parliament or any other kind of democratic bodies. So you know, you can see how they can get away. We don't know about most of these attacks. Occasionally one does get reported, and obviously when it does, I think there is a wave of outrage. And one of the important roles, I think, of the anti-war movements around the world is to continue to expose this drone warfare as very much part of the aggressive posture that the US and its allies have been adopting over the last 15 years, and every bit as damaging as other forms of aerial warfare. And we need to get those facts across, because it's not being reported in the media the way it should be, and it's not being discussed in democratic institutions.
In October 2015, an American gunship opened fire on a charity hospital in Afghanistan, burning patients to death in their beds. If your relative had been burned to death, would you have become a pacifist or an activist, and why? That's what we put to the public.
I would have become an activist to stop that kind of actions.
I would probably become a little bit of both, because being a pacifist means you aren't going to believe in the act of war any sort of violence, and if you have been negatively affected by the violence that have occurred through other countries, probably means that you want to be an activist to stop those kinds of atrocities from happening, which goes in hand with being a pacifist and an activist.
Definitely an activist. I mean, those victims, they have no way of protecting themselves, and so people would need a voice to, you know, advocate for them.
I will probably just leave it up to God.
I would say that if it happened to a relative of mine, that I would obviously be very concerned about that. But again, it comes back to the point where some things happen around the world and we have to try to do them in a way that saves the most lives, and sometimes you have to make tough decisions.
That's a good question. Yeah, if my family got burned alive in a hospital or blown up in a hospital, I'd be pretty mad too. You know, I couldn't say that I wouldn't go out and start, you know, fighting as well. You know, I understand that.
An activist. I don't know what good it would do, but you would hope that maybe you could change things.
You know, right now I'm a pacifist. I don't believe in war. I don't, you know, I'd like to also see myself as an activist too, in terms of trying to understand the issues. That's why I stopped to talk to you. I think it's horrific what's happened.
What is the likely impact on those who lose relatives in attacks such as the one on the Afghanistan hospital? Our experts said this.
You know, it's one of those questions we wish we never have to really answer, because we don't wish that on anybody, that they have to go through it. One thing would make you is very, very angry. Not only angry, but would make you contemptuous of the way international politics is being done. I don't think it's a question of being an activist or a pacifist. I think we're all pacifists in the sense nobody wants violence and nobody wants war. But we are all activists in the sense that we all do want to stand up for human rights, we all want to stand up for justice, and we all want to stand up for especially the oppressed person who's got nobody to actually speak up for him. So it's one of those areas which I would say that we are all pacifists and we are all equally activists. And both elements exist within us. It's just a shame that they have to both exist simply because of what other people are doing to other people around us.
I think it's almost unimaginable, really, to think about how people are likely to react in those sort of circumstances. But I think there's absolutely no question that the horror that has been unleashed over the last 15 years, not just from helicopter gunships and drone attacks, but by the occupations that took place in 2001 and 2003, have created a huge amount of anger against the Western powers. I think this is, you know, incontrovertible. And actually, if you look at the reality, the level of jihadi activity and terrorist organisation has spread in the years from 2001 till now, from small areas of Central Asia across an arc of the globe, including the Middle East, well into Africa, and now, of course, it threatens Europe. So I think there's no doubt that violence begets violence, and that one of the reasons why terrorism has become such a terrible phenomenon in the world is because of the wars that the West has fought.
The US plans to expand drone flights by as much as 50% over the next few years. What would the public like to say about this to Obama and to the next US president?
I just think we should have a better relationship with other countries than what we have now.
Well, I can understand a little bit because we want to avoid having so many troops on the ground, and I think this is a way of that's keeping your hands off but still getting a message across. So I think the advice would be to, if you have to do it very carefully.
I think they need to be very smart about this. I think it's a dangerous situation, and I don't think it's just the United States that needs to be smart. This is going to be used by everybody, and these drones are something that can be either a good thing or a very bad thing. And so I think they need to start making some regulations and and being smart about the decisions before they start acting on it.
At this point in time, I think everyone's aware that there need to be parameters for the use of drones so that it doesn't explode in an uncontrolled, dangerous situation. So I know that regulations and so forth are being developed as we speak to try to ensure that it doesn't become an outrageous issue.
I would say to continue doing that, because I think the drone program is something that definitely puts the least number of people at risk, and I think it should be something that's continued.
Can we find alternatives?
If you want to continue drone strikes, you should probably have better technology and better techniques in order to do so. Allowing these innocent civilians to die through unrelative techniques probably isn't solving the issue of U.S. security or in its best interest if you want to have better relationships with the Middle East.
We asked our experts what message they would like to send to Obama and to the next US president about plans to increase American drone strikes in the coming years.
Well, the message would be, even though knowing a leopard will never change its spots, quite simply, what have you gained over the last 15 years or so of drone strikes? Has it reduced international terrorism? Has it made you actually safer in a country? Has it made the rest of us safer, be it in Europe or in Asia or anywhere else in the world? And the simple answer is no. By increasing the drone attacks, what you're doing actually is making more people angry, making more people orphans, making more people widows, innocently as well. And you can't have this formula that it's okay to take out 100 people just to take out one man. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So my message would be, it's high time you changed your ways.
Well, our message is that there has to be a fundamental rethink and a U-turn in the kind of foreign policy that has been pursued by the West. That drones are secretive and terrifying, but they're not going to have any different outcome from the outcome of the previous strategies of the war on terror. Our message is that the single thing that would be most effective in reducing the terror threat is for the West to commit to pulling its troops out and all its military material out of the Middle East, out of Central Asia, and opting for a foreign policy based on diplomacy, based on the search for peace, based on the search for justice. These are the things that actually can diffuse what is now becoming a terrifying situation in which we are locked into a spiral of violence that is just expanding yearly, and there needs to be some decisive action now, and that's what the anti-war movement will continue to campaign for. We'll campaign against any further moves towards more wars, and now apparently Britain is planning to send 1,000 troops to Libya. After the catastrophes that were caused last time round, we'll be campaigning against any further wars, but also for a complete withdrawal of Western troops from the Middle East and beyond.
The US intends to expand drone flights by up to 50% for increased surveillance, reconnaissance and lethal airstrikes in more areas around the world. Successive US governments have used propaganda, including wrong intelligence, to launch attacks on Muslim-majority countries. Based on past experience, these will kill many civilians, leading to admissions, acknowledgements, and sometimes an apology. However, the tragic reality is that no apology can bring back the dead.